Blue lights pierce the dusk. A white officer's hand hovers near his weapon. A black driver silently extends, not a license, but a police chief's badge. Officer Brennan freezes mid-sneer, the contempt evaporating from his face as realization strikes. The dashboard camera captures his transformation from power-drunk authority to naked panic in 5 devastating seconds. The driver watches him with calm, evaluating eyes. He's seen this before, just never from the receiving end. The entire encounter recorded in high definition, preserving every microaggression, every abuse of power, every career-ending moment. What happens in the next 60 seconds will determine more than one career. Officer James Brennan cruises through Thompson Heights, the city's most exclusive neighborhood. Tasteful mansions set back from immaculate streets, property values that ensure a certain type of resident. His patrol car moves slowly, a protective presence for the community he considers the backbone of this city. Brennan's service record shows no official complaints. 15 years, 3 commendations for valor, respected among his peers. What doesn't show in his file is the mental taxonomy he's developed. Who belongs where, who deserves scrutiny, who gets the benefit of doubt. "Dispatch, I'm 10-8 in Thompson Heights," he radios, scanning the quiet streets. "All quiet so far." Inside his head runs a different narrative. These neighborhoods need protection from outside elements. There's a reason property values stay high here. There's a reason people feel safe. He's part of that reason. 3 streets over, Edward Madison adjusts his rear-view mirror, taking in the unfamiliar roads of his new neighborhood. His Mercedes navigates the curves with practiced ease. The moving van already delivered the essentials to the house yesterday. Today is about helping his family settle before Monday, when he officially begins as the city's new police chief. After 22 years of distinguished service in Atlanta, culminating as deputy commissioner, Edward accepted this position for the challenge and opportunity to implement the community-first policing model he's advocated throughout his career. The transition hasn't been easy on his family, but the promotion makes their sacrifices worthwhile. Edward slows at a 4-way stop, checking his GPS. 2 more turns to home. His mind already works through priorities for his first week, meeting key staff, reviewing department policies, establishing relationships with community leaders. Brennan spots the Mercedes from 2 blocks away. Expensive car, black driver, unfamiliar face. Mental flags raise automatically. He doesn't consciously articulate his thought process even to himself, but the calculation happens nonetheless. The equation balances, surveillance justified. He follows at a distance, watching. The Mercedes approaches a stop sign, rolls forward slightly before stopping, then proceeds. The violation is minimal, the kind Brennan would normally ignore. But today, it's enough. The patrol car's lights flash. Edward notices immediately, checks his speed out of habit, then signals and pulls to the curb. He takes a deep breath, places both hands on the wheel, and waits. As Brennan approached the driver's window, he couldn't know he was walking toward a turning point that would expose everything he tried to hide. Brennan approaches the Mercedes with calculated slowness, scanning for movement through tinted windows. His right hand rests near his holster, not drawing attention to the weapon, but keeping it accessible. Years of traffic stops have taught him to anticipate anything. Edward watches the officer's approach in his side mirror. The deliberate walk, the positioned hand, signals he recognizes immediately. He's trained officers himself on proper procedure, but also recognizes when caution crosses into intimidation. He maintains perfect stillness. The window glides down silently. Edward offers a neutral smile. "Good afternoon, officer." Brennan stands slightly behind the doorframe, positioning himself at an angle that establishes dominance. "License and registration. Do you know why I pulled you over today?" "I'm not certain," Edward responds, voice measured. "Was I speeding?" "You rolled through that stop sign back there." Brennan's tone suggests he's caught someone in a significant transgression rather than a minor traffic violation. "This is a safe neighborhood. We take traffic laws seriously here." Edward nods. "I apologize if I didn't come to a complete stop. I'm still learning the area. New to the neighborhood, are you? Brennan's question carries weight beyond simple conversation. That's a nice car. What brings you to Thompson Heights? I recently relocated for work, Edward says, reaching slowly for his wallet. Here's my license. Edward considers revealing his position but decides against it. The interaction interests him professionally. This is raw data about his new department's street-level conduct. He hands over his license without commentary. I'll need to see registration as well, Brennan says, taking the license with a critical eye. Edward retrieves the registration from his glove compartment with deliberate movements, acutely aware of how sudden gestures might be interpreted. He hands it over, maintaining eye contact. Wait here, Brennan instructs, walking back to his patrol car. In the privacy of his vehicle, Brennan radios his partner. Got a 1029 on a black male, Thompson Heights area, driving a vehicle above his pay grade. Running his info now. Anyone we know? Comes the crackling response. Nah, out-of-state plates. Probably just passing through where he doesn't belong. Brennan chuckles, typing Edward's information into his computer. You know how they like to drive through here pretending. Edward sits motionless, watching Brennan in his rearview mirror. His expression remains neutral, but his mind catalogs every procedural violation, every loaded phrase, every microaggression. As a former internal affairs officer, the patterns are familiar. As the person experiencing them, they take on new significance. Brennan returns to the Mercedes with a different energy, more assertive, shoulders squared. The computer check revealed nothing concerning, just a clean driving record and a Georgia address. This bothers him more than he admits to himself. His instincts told him something was off, and his instincts are rarely wrong. Step out of the vehicle, please, he commands, no longer framing it as a request. Edward pauses. May I ask why that's necessary, Officer Brennan? He notes the nameplate now that the officer stands closer. Standard procedure, Brennan lies smoothly. When we have out-of-state visitors in residential areas, we like to be thorough. Edward knows this isn't standard procedure for a rolling stop. It's an escalation without cause. Still, he complies, opening the door slowly and stepping onto the pavement. Face the vehicle. Hands on the hood, please. Edward complies again, feeling the weight of each movement. The luxury car's hood is warm beneath his palms. A passing car slows, occupants watching the scene unfold. A well-dressed black man being detained by a white officer in an affluent neighborhood. The optics aren't lost on Edward. Spread your feet, Brennan instructs, beginning a pat-down that's unnecessary for a traffic violation. Edward endures the humiliation silently, aware of eyes from neighboring houses now. A woman walking her dog across the street slows her pace, watching with visible concern. What brings you to Thompson Heights today? Brennan asks again, pat-down complete but keeping Edward facing away from him. As I mentioned, I recently relocated for work. What kind of work would that be? The question carries insinuation. Law enforcement, Edward answers truthfully but incompletely. Brennan pauses. Security guard? Something like that. Brennan gestures toward the curb. Have a seat there while I verify a few more details. Edward sits on the curb as instructed, the indignity compounding. He's wearing a tailored suit worth more than Brennan's monthly salary, now collecting dust from the roadside. He remains composed, watching Brennan return to the patrol car. The woman with the dog approaches hesitantly. Is everything okay here? She asks, looking between Edward and the officer. Everything's fine, ma'am, Brennan interjects before Edward can respond. Just handling a situation. You can continue on your way. I live just there, she points, reluctant to leave. Are you sure? Ma'am. Brennan's voice hardens slightly. This gentleman isn't from around here. We're just making sure everything's in order. Police business. The woman hesitates, looks apologetically at Edward, then continues walking, glancing back several times. Edward memorizes her face, a potential witness. He also notes Brennan's badge number and patrol car identification, information already committed to memory from years of investigative work. His humiliation serves a purpose now. Each moment adds to the comprehensive picture of departmental conduct he's building. A teenage boy on a bicycle stops across the street, phone clearly recording the scene. Brennan doesn't notice, focused on Edward and his computer check. Edward gives no indication he's seen the boy either, but internally acknowledges another witness documenting the encounter. What Officer Brennan couldn't see was the text message Edward had just sent, or the multiple witnesses now recording the entire incident from their front porches. After nearly 20 minutes of pointless detention, Brennan returns with Edward's license and a warning citation. He hands them over with a professionally blank expression that doesn't reach his eyes. "Just a warning today, Mr. Madison. Make sure you come to a complete stop at intersections in the future." His tone shifts slightly, dropping into something more personal. "Thompson Heights has a lot of children playing. We take traffic safety very seriously here." Edward accepts the paperwork with a steady hand. "Thank you, officer." "And since you're new to the area," Brennan adds, "you should know we patrol these streets regularly. I'll keep an eye out for you." The threat veiled as community policing doesn't go unnoticed. Edward nods once, returning to his car with measured steps. Only when the door closes does he allow himself a deep exhale, hands gripping the steering wheel until his knuckles whiten. The patrol car remains behind him, lights still flashing. Edward starts the Mercedes and pulls away slowly, perfectly signaling his turn. In the rearview mirror, he watches Brennan watching him until the road curves and breaks their visual connection. 2 blocks away, Edward pulls into a coffee shop parking lot. His hands shake slightly, not from fear, but from controlled anger. The kind that doesn't explode but burns methodically, fueling purpose rather than destroying it. He reaches for his phone and dials a number from memory. "Catherine, it's Edward Madison." His voice remains professional despite the adrenaline still coursing through him. "Yes, I'm in town. Actually, I've just had an interesting welcome to the city from one of our officers." He listens briefly. "No, I'd prefer no immediate action. This may be useful." "Yes, a learning opportunity. Could you secure the dash cam footage from Officer James Brennan's patrol car today? Approximately 2:30 p.m. Have it available, but don't mention it to anyone yet." He ends the call, then opens his contacts again. The city manager who recruited him deserves to know, but Edward frames it carefully when the man answers. "Robert, it's Edward. I've arrived in town. Yes, the house is suitable. Listen, something happened today that you should be aware of, though I don't want any immediate action taken." He explains the traffic stop in clinical detail, emphasizing factual observations over emotional responses. The city manager's outrage grows audible, but Edward remains calm. "No, I want to handle this myself. It's actually given me valuable insight." "Yes, exactly. This isn't about one officer. This is data." He pauses. "I'd appreciate your discretion until I officially start on Monday." Meanwhile, Brennan parks at a convenience store 2 miles away, radioing his partner again. "That Madison guy? Nothing came up. Clean record." He sounds almost disappointed. "Something felt off, though. Guy said he works in law enforcement, but acted strange about it. Probably security at the mall or something, trying to sound important." "You let him go?" his partner asks. "Gave him a warning. Made sure he knows we're watching." Brennan chuckles. "Bet he takes the long way around Thompson Heights next time." "You're terrible, man," his partner responds, but there's uncomfortable laughter in his voice. "One of these days that attitude's gonna bite you." "Been doing this 15 years, Brennan dismisses the concern. "I know the type. Trust me." Back at his new home, Edward greets his wife and daughter with forced cheerfulness. When his wife notices his distraction and asks what's wrong, he provides a simplified version of events. "Just a minor traffic stop, nothing serious." His reassurance isn't entirely convincing. Was it because... His wife doesn't finish the question. "Probably," Edward answers. but it's actually given me some clarity about priorities for the department. Later that evening, after family matters are settled, Edward sits at his desk with the warning citation before him. He opens his laptop and begins typing a detailed account of the incident. Time, location, officer information, sequence of events, procedural violations, witnesses. The document reads like an internal affairs report because that's exactly what it is. He reviews department policies on traffic stops, highlighting each violation. When finished, he saves the document and sends another email requesting radio transmissions from Brennan's patrol car during the time of the stop. Evidence gathering is second nature after decades in law enforcement. The difference now is that he has the authority to ensure consequences. In exactly 1 week, Officer Brennan would walk into the morning briefing to find a surprise that would make his blood run cold. Brennan's patrol car glides through Thompson Heights the following afternoon, his partner, Officer Diaz, riding shotgun. The rhythm of their shift feels routine. Community visibility patrol, responding to minor calls, maintaining order in a city sector that rarely experiences serious crime. "So you really made that guy sit on the curb yesterday?" Diaz asks, breaking a comfortable silence. "For a rolling stop?" "He was suspicious," Brennan defends. "Out-of-state plates, couldn't give a straight answer about why he was in the neighborhood." He glances at his partner. "You weren't there. Something felt off." Diaz shifts uncomfortably. "Just saying, man. Department's under scrutiny these days. Social media and all that. Since when do you worry about Twitter cops?" Brennan scoffs. "We're doing our jobs. If people don't like how we do it, they should try living without us for a week." Diaz falls silent, choosing not to argue. Their working relationship functions through selective engagement, knowing which battles matter. Brennan interprets the silence as agreement rather than the reluctant acquiescence it actually represents. Across town, Edward Madison sits across from Robert Chen, the city manager, and Diana Powell, HR director. The conference room's large windows overlook the city center, a view Edward barely notices as he focuses on the laptop screen before them. "This is from Officer Brennan's dash cam," Edward explains, playing the footage of yesterday's traffic stop. Notice his hand position as he approaches, the immediate escalation to a vehicle exit and search despite no probable cause. Robert Chen's expression darkens as he watches. "This is completely unacceptable. We should begin termination proceedings immediately." "No," Edward counters firmly. "That solves nothing." "With all due respect," Powell interjects. "This is textbook harassment. The liability alone—" "This isn't about liability or an individual officer," Edward interrupts. "If we terminate Brennan, the department narratives become about one bad apple, rather than addressing the cultural environment that enables this behavior." He closes the laptop, leaning forward. "When I accepted this position, we discussed my vision for community-oriented policing. This incident confirms the necessity of that approach. Firing one officer doesn't create institutional change. It just makes everyone else better at hiding problematic behavior." "What do you propose instead?" Chen asks, skepticism evident. "I start my official duties today, not Monday. Quietly, no announcement. I need to review personnel files, complaint histories, and department metrics before making myself known." Edward's expression remains professional but determined. This isn't just about Brennan. I need to understand who enables him, who opposes him, and who remains silent. Powell and Chen exchange glances, recognizing the strategic approach of an experienced law enforcement professional. Their initial reactive anger gives way to respect for his methodical response. "You have our full support," Chen finally agrees. "Whatever resources you need." Meanwhile, Brennan and Diaz respond to a call about a suspicious person in a residential area near downtown. A lower-income neighborhood than Thompson Heights, but undergoing gentrification that creates tension between established residents and newcomers. The suspicious person turns out to be a Hispanic teenager walking home from baseball practice. Brennan approaches with the same authoritative stance he used with Edward, though slightly less aggressive. The questioning follows familiar patterns. Where are you going? Where do you live? What's in the bag? The interaction ends without incident, but Diaz notices the teenager's resigned expression, the look of someone who experiences these stops regularly. It's routine for the officers, procedural. For the teenager, it's another reminder of his provisional status in public spaces. "Kids seem fine," Brennan comments as they return to the patrol car. "Just checking things out." Diaz nods without speaking, adding another item to his mental list of concerns he never voices. The department culture doesn't reward those who question established practices, especially coming from a junior officer partnered with a veteran like Brennan. By evening, Edward has established a temporary office in a conference room at headquarters, his presence known only to a handful of administrative staff sworn to secrecy. Personnel files cover the table, organized into patterns only he recognizes. Complaint records, commendations, patrol assignments, arrest statistics. The data tells stories beyond individual incidents. A pattern emerges around Brennan and 4 other officers with similar behavioral markers. More concerning are the supervisors who dismissed civilian complaints against these officers, creating an environment where accountability evaporates before reaching consequential levels. Edward makes notes in his precise handwriting, mapping connections invisible to those embedded in the system. This isn't just about racism. It's about power, accountability, and the corrupting effect of unchecked authority. The solutions must address all levels of the dysfunction. As Edward reviewed the pattern of complaints, one name kept appearing in witness statements, someone who could bring the entire house of cards tumbling down. The community center on Westfield Avenue sits at the boundary between Thompson Heights and the more diverse Parkside neighborhood. Edward arrives in casual clothes, no indicators of his profession or new position. The building hosts tonight's community forum on police-community relations, a regular event typically attended by the same frustrated citizens and the same defensive department representatives. Edward takes a seat in the back row, notebook in hand. He observes without engaging, cataloging faces and dynamics. The moderator, a retired schoolteacher, maintains admirable neutrality despite obvious tension in the room. "I've filed 3 complaints about targeted traffic stops in my neighborhood," a middle-aged black woman states firmly. Each time, the investigation concludes with insufficient evidence despite multiple witnesses. A police representative offers practiced responses about proper channels and procedural requirements. Edward notes how the bureaucratic language creates distance rather than connection. The woman's frustration visibly grows with each non-answer. After the meeting, Edward approaches her in the parking lot. "Ms. Washington, I found your comments insightful." She regards him with justifiable suspicion. "And you are?" "Edward Madison. I'm new to the city, trying to understand community concerns." Not a lie, though incomplete. "Would you be willing to share more about your experiences with the department?" Her hesitation lasts several seconds before deciding to trust him. "If you're genuinely interested, several of us meet at Riverside Coffee on Thursdays." Edward collects similar connections throughout the week. Small conversations, contact information, invitations to community gatherings. He builds a network of voices systematically excluded from official channels, each providing pieces to the larger puzzle. Across town in a local bar popular with law enforcement, Brennan sits with a group of officers from his shift. The evening ritual involves cold beer, department gossip, and the occasional complaint about administration. "Heard we're getting a new chief next week," Officer Rivera mentions, signaling for another round. "What's the point?" Brennan dismisses. "Another politician in a uniform. They come in talking reform, then realize they need us more than we need them." "Word is this one's from Atlanta," adds Sergeant Miller. "Some hotshot who turned around their community policing division." "Community policing," Brennan mockingly echoes. "Coffee with complainers while real crime happens elsewhere." "I don't know," Officer Taylor interjects cautiously. "Those departments with solid community relationships get better intelligence, more witnesses cooperating." "That your professional assessment after your whole 2 years on the force?" Brennan's tone carries enough edge that Taylor immediately backpedals. "Just repeating what they taught at the academy." The conversation shifts to safer topics. weekend plans, sports, equipment complaints. Underneath runs the current of resistance to change, particularly from officers like Brennan, whose identity and authority remain intertwined. Edward spends his third evening at headquarters reviewing body camera footage of Brennan and officers with similar complaint patterns. He identifies Officer Sarah Jensen, a 5-year veteran whose reports occasionally contain subtle contradictions to Brennan's when they respond to calls together. Her performance reviews show excellence in community engagement but stalled promotion prospects. The next morning, Edward arranges a casual encounter with Jensen in the department gym, introducing himself as a new transfer without revealing his rank. Their conversation remains professional, but provides Edward insights into departmental dynamics from a perspective unfiltered by knowledge of his position. "Challenging environment?" Edward asks between sets. Jensen measures her response carefully. "Like anywhere, good officers trying their best. And the not-so-good?" Her pause speaks volumes. "Protected by the right connections. Same as any department, I imagine." Edward builds similar connections with other officers identified through personnel reviews, those with ethical complaint records, community engagement commitments, or patterns of reporting that diverge from problematic officers. A shadow network forms, unseen by those who believe the status quo immutable. Friday afternoon, an all-staff email circulates announcing Monday's introduction of the new chief of police. No biographical information, no photograph, just a time and location for the briefing. Speculation spreads throughout the department, officers and civilian staff alike constructing narratives about what changes might come. Brennan reads the email with indifference. "Another suit telling cops how to police," he comments to Diaz. 2 weeks of reform talk, then back to reality." "You never know," Diaz responds. "Might be different this time." Brennan laughs. "When's the last time anything really changed around here? We'll outlast this one just like the others." The weekend passed with whispers and speculation, but no one, especially not Officer Brennan, could have predicted what Monday morning would reveal. Monday morning arrives with the predictable rhythms of shift change. Officers gather in the briefing room, dividing naturally into their usual social groupings. Brennan and his circle claim the back row, coffee cups in hand, exchanging weekend stories punctuated by knowing laughter. The room quiets as Captain Rodriguez steps to the podium. His normally relaxed demeanor appears slightly strained, an observation not lost on the more perceptive officers. "Good morning," Rodriguez begins. "As you're all aware, today we welcome our new chief of police. I expect everyone to demonstrate the professionalism and respect that defines this department." Brennan leans toward Officer Miller, whispering something that elicits a smothered laugh. Rodriguez pauses, glancing in their direction before continuing. "Chief Madison comes to us with an impressive record of innovation and leadership. His work in Atlanta revolutionized their community policing division and significantly reduced both crime rates and civilian complaints." Brennan rolls his eyes, the gesture caught by several officers who've positioned themselves strategically throughout the room, Edward's quiet allies identified during the past week. "Without further delay," Rodriguez concludes, "please welcome Chief Edward Madison." The side door opens. Edward enters wearing the formal uniform of the department's chief, stars gleaming on his collar. His posture communicates authority without arrogance, his expression professionally neutral as he surveys the room. In the back row, Brennan's coffee cup freezes halfway to his mouth. Recognition dawns in stages across his face. Confusion, disbelief. Then the hollow realization of his vulnerability. The cup lowers slowly, as if he's forgotten he's holding it. Edward steps to the podium without acknowledging Brennan specifically, though several officers notice his gaze lingering briefly on the back row. "Thank you, Captain Rodriguez." Edward's voice carries easily through the suddenly silent room. "I appreciate the welcome and look forward to working with each of you." His presentation proceeds with methodical precision, department priorities, community engagement initiatives, accountability measures. Each point references specific policies that directly address issues from Brennan's traffic stop without ever mentioning the incident. Body cameras will remain activated during all civilian interactions, Edward emphasizes. No exceptions. These protect both the public and officers from misunderstandings or misrepresentations. Officers exchange glances, sensing the subtle shift in departmental gravity. This isn't the typical vague reform language of previous administrations, but specific, actionable directives with clear expectations. Traffic enforcement should focus on genuine safety concerns, Edward continues, not as pretexts for investigative stops without reasonable suspicion. Our metrics will shift accordingly. Quality of community safety outcomes rather than quantity of citations. With each point, Brennan seems to physically diminish in his chair. Colleagues previously aligned with him create subtle distance, shifting in their seats or focusing intently on taking notes. I believe in second chances, Edward concludes, meeting various officers' eyes around the room. I also believe in accountability. Both are essential to a department that serves its community with integrity. My door is open to those committed to those values. Following the briefing, officers form a line to introduce themselves to their new chief. Edward greets each with genuine attention, connecting names with details gleaned from personnel files without revealing the extent of his preparation. Brennan attempts to slip out a side door, using the crowd as cover. "Officer Brennan," Edward's voice cuts through the room's conversation. "A moment, please." The room doesn't quite fall silent, but attention shifts toward this first test of the new command structure. Brennan turns slowly, professional mask firmly in place as he approaches. "Chief Madison." He extends his hand with forced confidence. Edward accepts the handshake, maintaining eye contact. "I'd like to see you in my office at 2 o'clock. "Yes, sir." Brennan's voice betrays nothing, but the pulse visible at his throat tells a different story. "Thank you." Edward turns to the next officer, effectively dismissing Brennan without further comment. Brennan exits the briefing room, immediately pulling out his phone to call the union representative. The conversation is brief and urgent, ending with Brennan pacing the parking lot, reality settling around him like a shrinking cell. He returns to the station and approaches the records department, requesting access to his dashcam footage from the previous week. The clerk's apologetic response confirms his fears. "Those files were transferred to the chief's office this morning. You'll need to request access through proper channels." Brennan's union representative meets him in the station cafeteria, their conversation conducted in hushed tones over untouched coffee. "How bad is the footage?" the rep asks bluntly. "Standard traffic stop," Brennan insists, though his expression lacks conviction. "Maybe a bit more thorough than usual, but nothing outside protocol." "Did you use any language that could be interpreted as biased? Any procedural violations?" Brennan's silence provides the answer. "I'll be present for the meeting," the rep sighs. "Say as little as possible. Don't." As Brennan approached the chief's office that afternoon, he had no idea that on the conference table lay not just the dashcam footage, but 15 other complaint files with his name highlighted in yellow. Brennan stands outside the chief's office at precisely 1:58 p.m., union representative beside him. His uniform is impeccable, posture military straight, armor against what's coming. The secretary nods for them to enter without looking up from her computer. Edward sits behind a desk that still bears the previous chief's organizational system. The room remains in transition, boxes half unpacked, but the wall now displays Edward's credentials, commendations, and a framed photograph of his family. The contrast between the unsettled office and Edward's complete composure amplifies the power dynamic. "Officer Brennan, Mr. Kovac." Edward acknowledges each with a nod. "Please, sit." The conference table holds a laptop, closed, and several manila folders arranged in a precise line. Brennan focuses on controlling his breathing as he takes a seat across from Edward. The union rep places a legal pad between them, pen ready. "I appreciate punctuality," Edward begins, voice neutral. He opens the laptop, turns it to face them, but doesn't immediately play anything. "Before we begin, is there anything you'd like to share about our previous interaction?" Brennan hesitates, caught between denial and acknowledgement. The union rep subtly touches his arm, a warning to remain silent. "Chief Madison," the rep interjects, "if this concerns a specific incident, we'd like to understand the nature of any allegations before Officer Brennan responds." Edward nods, accepting the procedural deflection. "Of course." He presses play on the laptop. The dash cam footage begins. Brennan's approach to Edward's vehicle, hand positioned near his weapon, the escalating demands, the curb detention. The audio captures every inflection, every implied threat, every moment of humiliation manufactured from a minor traffic violation. Edward allows the footage to play without comment, watching Brennan rather than the screen. The officer's expression remains professionally blank, but micro-expressions reveal his internal calculation, assessing damage, formulating explanations, measuring the threat level. When the video ends, silence fills the room. Edward closes the laptop deliberately. "I wanted to experience how officers in this department treat citizens before they know who they're dealing with," Edward finally says. "Your actions showed me exactly what needs to change." Have you ever witnessed someone use their authority inappropriately? How did it end for them? Brennan shifts in his chair. "Chief, with respect, any officer might have made the same assessment based on what exactly?" Edward interrupts, voice still measured. "A rolling stop? Or something about the driver that suggested additional scrutiny was warranted?" The union rep intervenes. "Chief Madison, if you're suggesting racial profiling—" "I'm not suggesting anything," Edward counters. "The evidence speaks for itself." He opens the first folder, sliding it toward them. This contains 7 civilian complaints filed against Officer Brennan in the past 18 months. All from minority drivers stopped in affluent neighborhoods. All dismissed during preliminary review. He opens a second folder. These are performance evaluations noting Officer Brennan's proactive policing style and intuitive threat assessment, qualities his supervisors apparently valued despite the pattern emerging in complaint statistics. A third folder. Statements from 3 officers who've partnered with Officer Brennan documenting concerning comments and behavior they witnessed but felt unable to formally report due to department culture. With each folder, Brennan's professional facade cracks further. The union rep's expression grows increasingly grim. "This isn't a witch hunt," Edward continues. "This is accountability. Not just for Officer Brennan, but for the supervisors who enabled this behavior, the review process that dismissed valid complaints, and the cultural environment that silenced officers who recognized problems." Brennan finds his voice. "You set me up. You deliberately provoked that traffic stop. I drove through a neighborhood where I now live. You made every choice that followed." Edward's tone remains even. "But this meeting isn't about one incident. It's about a pattern of behavior incompatible with the department we're going to become." The power dynamic crystallizes between them. The man Brennan humiliated now controls his professional fate. The realization visibly lands as Brennan's shoulders slump slightly, the first genuine physical response since entering the room. Edward leans forward. "You have 2 options, Officer Brennan. Participate in a comprehensive accountability process with the possibility of redemption, or face formal disciplinary proceedings that will likely end your law enforcement career." "Accountability process?" the union rep questions. "Implicit bias training. Community service in the neighborhoods where Officer Brennan has conducted most of his problematic stops. Ride-alongs with community leaders. Regular review of stop data and body camera footage." Edward outlines each element precisely. Successful completion could lead to reinstatement to full duties with ongoing monitoring. Brennan looks to his representative, who gives a subtle nod. It's a better offer than expected. "Why not just fire me?" Brennan asks, genuine confusion breaking through his defensive posture. "Because this isn't about punishment, it's about transformation." Edward closes the folders methodically. "I'm not here for revenge. I'm here to build a department that serves everyone equally. The question is whether you can be part of that future." The choice hangs between them, A career-defining moment stripped of its usual bureaucratic protections. Brennan faces not an adversary seeking his destruction, but a leader offering a difficult path to redemption. "I need to consider my options," Brennan finally says. Edward nods. "You have 48 hours to decide, but understand this. Reform is happening with or without your participation. The only question is whether you'll be an example of the problem or part of the solution." What Brennan didn't realize was that his decision would impact far more than his own career. It would set in motion a transformation that would reach every corner of the department. The department-wide email arrives at precisely 9 a.m. the next day. Subject line: Structural Reform Initiative, Immediate Implementation. Edward's message outlines comprehensive changes to departmental policies, procedures, and performance metrics. The language is clinical, but the implications revolutionary. Officers gather in small clusters throughout the station, phones displaying the same email, conversations hushed but intense. The fault lines forming don't follow expected racial divisions but ethical ones, those who recognize the necessity of change versus those invested in preserving the status quo. "He can't just overhaul everything overnight," Officer Miller protests in the locker room. "The union will fight this." "Read paragraph 3 again," Jensen counters. "Every change falls within the chief's administrative authority. The union can dispute specifics, but not the overall direction." In his temporary office, Edward conducts back-to-back meetings with command staff. Each conversation follows a similar pattern: initial resistance giving way to reluctant acknowledgement of problems, finally shifting toward tentative engagement with solutions. The most resistant commanders find themselves assigned to lead key reform initiatives, accountability built into their performance reviews. By afternoon, news of Brennan's situation spreads through department channels. Officers who'd witnessed his behavior for years without comment now distance themselves, career preservation overriding loyalty. Others privately contact Edward, offering additional information about problematic incidents previously buried in administrative indifference. Brennan himself remains conspicuously absent, placed on administrative duty pending his decision. The empty patrol car space in the department parking lot becomes a visual reminder of accountability's new reality. The weekly city council meeting transforms into an impromptu referendum on Edward's reforms. The council chambers overflow with community members, department representatives, and media. Edward presents his findings and implementation plan with methodical precision, supporting each point with statistical evidence and specific policy references. "These changes aren't punitive," he emphasizes to the divided council. "They're corrective. We're not dismantling effective policing, we're enhancing it by removing barriers to community trust." Councilwoman Rivera leans toward her microphone. "Chief Madison, while I support these objectives in principle, the pace seems aggressive. Perhaps a more gradual approach." "Respectfully, Councilwoman," Edward interrupts. "Gradual reform is what this department has attempted for a decade, according to your own Oversight Committee reports. The results speak for themselves." He displays a graph showing increasing civilian complaints alongside decreasing substantiation rates. These aren't just statistics. Each point represents a community member whose experience eroded trust in the institution sworn to protect them. Community members provide testimony, stories of biased enforcement, disproportionate scrutiny, accumulated indignities that shaped their relationship with law enforcement. Their accounts transform abstract policy discussions into human impact statements. Mrs. Washington, whom Edward met at the community forum, speaks directly to the council. "I've lived in this city for 37 years. I've filed complaints, attended forums, followed proper channels. This is the first time I've seen leadership acknowledge the problem exists, let alone present solutions." Councilman Barton, a former prosecutor known for his law enforcement support, shifts uncomfortably. "Chief Madison, these reforms place additional burdens on officers already performing difficult jobs. How do you respond to concerns about officer morale?" "True morale comes from meaningful work performed with integrity," Edward responds. Our good officers, and they are the majority, want to serve communities that trust them. These reforms give them that opportunity. Internal Affairs. Captain Reynolds sits with visible discomfort as Edward outlines changes to the complaint review process. External Oversight Board, transparent tracking systems, elimination of preliminary dismissal options that had buried legitimate concerns. Captain Reynolds will lead implementation, Edward announces, meeting the man's surprised gaze directly. His extensive experience with the current system provides valuable insight into necessary improvements. The strategic assignment isn't lost on department observers, the official most responsible for the previous system's failures now accountable for its reformation. As the council meeting concludes, the city manager addresses the room. The administration fully supports Chief Madison's initiatives. These represent the commitments to community-responsive policing that we outlined in our strategic plan last year. The carefully worded statement places the council in a difficult position. Opposing reforms means contradicting their own published priorities. Political calculus plays across council members' faces as they recognize the elegant trap. Following the public meeting, Edward faces the assembled media. Cameras capture his measured responses, the contrast between his calm demeanor and the significance of his announcements creating compelling footage for evening news. This isn't about one incident or one officer, he explains when questioned about specifics. This is about aligning our practices with our stated values. We cannot claim to protect and serve while maintaining systems that undermine community trust. Behind the scenes, union representatives meet with city attorneys, discovering limited options for opposing the reforms. Edward's legal background and methodical implementation leave few procedural openings for challenge. The union president privately concedes they're outmatched, shifting strategy toward shaping implementation rather than preventing it. Officer Jensen approaches Edward as he returns to headquarters. Several officers would like to speak with you, Chief. Privately. The meeting reveals unexpected allies, officers who've recognized problems but found no institutional support for addressing them. They offer insights, suggest refinements, and most importantly, commit to the new direction. There are more of us than you might think, Jensen tells him. We join to make a difference. These changes give us that chance. By week's end, Brennan submits his decision through his union representative. He'll participate in the accountability process. The choice appears less about redemption than survival, but Edward recognizes that meaningful change often begins with pragmatic compliance before attitudinal shift. As the hearing date approached, Brennan faced a choice that would define not just his career, but the person he would become when stripped of the power he had abused. The disciplinary hearing room contains no spectators, no media, just the review panel, necessary participants, and the weight of consequence. 7 chairs form a semicircle facing a single seat. The arrangement itself communicates the power dynamic at work. Brennan enters wearing his Class A uniform, the formal dress of department ceremonies rather than his daily patrol attire. The choice reads as both respect for the proceedings and armor against judgment. His expression maintains professional neutrality, though the tightness around his eyes betrays underlying stress. The panel represents diverse perspectives: 2 senior officers, a civilian oversight representative, the city's HR director, an ethics professor from the local university, a community leader, and Edward himself. Their collective presence transforms what might have been an internal police matter into a community reckoning. This hearing will determine appropriate accountability measures for Officer James Brennan regarding substantiated violations of department policies, the civilian chair begins. This is not a criminal proceeding, but an administrative review with potential employment consequences. Brennan sits rigidly as evidence unfolds. Dash cam footage, complaint histories, statistical analyses of his traffic stops compared to departmental averages. Each presentation builds a comprehensive picture beyond the isolated incident with Edward. When invited to respond, Brennan begins with practiced defensiveness. My record shows 15 years of dedicated service, he states. I've worked dangerous assignments and maintained community safety throughout my career. No one questions your technical competence, Officer Brennan, the ethics professor interjects. What concerns us is the pattern of discretionary judgments revealed by this evidence. The distinction pierces Brennan's prepared narrative. His gaze drops momentarily as he recalibrates his approach. I followed my training, he continues, voice less certain. We were taught to be proactive, to trust our instincts about suspicious circumstances. And what made Mr. Madison's presence in Thompson Heights suspicious? A community representative asks. The question hangs uncomfortable in the room. Brennan's internal struggle plays across his face, the conflict between continued denial and the dawning recognition that honesty might offer his only path forward. I made assumptions, he finally admits, the words seemingly painful to extract. Based on patterns I thought I recognized. Racial patterns, the representative presses. Brennan's silence confirms what he cannot yet verbalize. Officer Brennan, Edward speaks for the first time, this panel doesn't expect perfection. We're looking for accountability and capacity for growth. Those require honest self-assessment. Something in Edward's tone, professional yet not unsympathetic, creates space for vulnerability rather than defensive posturing. Throughout my career, certain approaches were rewarded, Brennan continues, voice steadier now. Statistical productivity, proactive interventions. Nobody questioned how we chose which vehicles to stop or which neighborhoods needed additional scrutiny. He straightens in his chair. That doesn't excuse my actions, but it explains the context in which they developed. The panel exchanges glances. This represents progress beyond the expected denial. Edward nods slightly, encouraging continued reflection. My father was a police officer, Brennan adds unexpectedly. He policed the way he was taught, which is how his father policed before him. I thought I was carrying on a tradition of protecting communities. At what point did you recognize that tradition might contain flawed assumptions? The ethics professor asks. I'm not sure I fully did until recently, Brennan admits. Certain attitudes were so normalized they became invisible, like background radiation you don't notice until someone measures it. The panel deliberates for 90 minutes while Brennan waits in a separate room, the solitude providing unavoidable space for reflection. When recalled, he stands before them with diminished defensiveness, something closer to resignation having replaced his earlier rigidity. The chair delivers their determination. Officer James Brennan will be suspended without pay for 60 days, during which he will complete comprehensive implicit bias training, cultural competency education, and community engagement activities under supervision. Following suspension, he will serve 6 months in an administrative capacity while completing additional requirements, including community service in neighborhoods where his enforcement activities showed statistical disparities. Brennan receives the determination with complex emotions crossing his face, relief at avoiding termination, resentment at the requirements, and something less definable that might be the first recognition of genuine accountability. Do you accept these terms, Officer Brennan? The chair asks. Yes. The single word carries the weight of a journey not yet begun but now unavoidable. 6 months later, as Brennan prepared to address the community he had once policed with bias, no one expected the transformation they were about to witness. 6 months transformed the department in ways both visible and foundational. The physical space reflects the philosophical shift. The lobby now displays community artwork, conference rooms renamed after neighborhoods rather than former chiefs, bulletin boards showcasing positive officer-community interactions alongside traditional recognition. More significant changes occur beneath surface appearances. Recruitment practices expand beyond traditional pipelines, attracting candidates from diverse backgrounds. The academy curriculum now includes substantial training on implicit bias, cultural competency, and ethical decision-making taught by community representatives alongside veteran officers. Edward reviews statistical reports with his command staff, the data projecting on the conference room wall. Traffic enforcement patterns show significant changes, he notes. Citations for serious moving violations are up 12%, while investigative stops without resulting citations have decreased 37%. Captain Rodriguez points to another metric. Civilian complaints down 22% overall, but more significantly, the geographic distribution has evened out across neighborhoods. The substance of complaints has shifted too, adds Lieutenant Jensen, recently promoted to head the Community Engagement Division. We're seeing fewer allegations of disrespect or bias and more procedural concerns that can be addressed through training. The comprehensive review of department policies continues producing substantive changes. Use of force guidelines clarified, de-escalation requirements strengthened, performance evaluations restructured to prioritize community trust alongside traditional metrics. Officers initially resistant to reform find themselves navigating changed expectations. Some transfer to other departments seeking more traditional environments. Others adapt pragmatically, behavior shifting before attitudes. A notable minority embrace the changes wholeheartedly, their previously suppressed commitment to ethical policing finding institutional support. Community advisory boards transition from symbolic forums to influential bodies with genuine input on policies and priorities. Their quarterly meetings feature robust discussions rather than ceremonial presentations, disagreement valued as productive rather than adversarial. Survey data shows measurable improvement in community perceptions, trust increasing incrementally in previously alienated neighborhoods, cooperation with investigations rising alongside willingness to report crimes and provide witness statements. The causation is clear, Edward explains to the City Council. When communities trust that enforcement will be fair and respectful, they participate more fully in public safety partnerships. State-level police leadership takes notice. Edward receives invitations to present at regional conferences, consultant requests from neighboring departments, interest from state legislators considering reform legislation. The department's approach becomes a case study in implementing meaningful change without sacrificing effective policing. Throughout this transformation, Brennan completes his prescribed program with initial reluctance evolving into something more complex. The implicit bias training initially triggers defensiveness, but skilled facilitators create space for reflection rather than accusation. Community service places him in neighborhoods he previously viewed only through patrol car windows. Working alongside residents on neighborhood improvement projects gradually transforms abstract demographics into individual relationships. Theoretical concepts of equity become concrete through shared effort and conversation. The mentorship component proves particularly transformative. Paired with Mrs. Washington, the community advocate whose complaints he once dismissed, Brennan experiences uncomfortable but necessary conversations about impact versus intention. I never saw myself as racist, he admits during one session. Most people don't, she responds without accusation. But impact matters more than self-perception. On the anniversary of that fateful traffic stop, two men would sit across from each other at a community center, neither the same person they had been that day. The community center bustles with activity, families gathering for the neighborhood safety fair organized jointly by resident associations and the police department. Information booths line the walls, children participate in identification card programs, and officers engage in conversations unrelated to enforcement actions. Edward moves through the space in civilian clothes, his position evident only to those who recognize him personally. He observes interactions rather than directing them, measuring success through the natural rhythm of engagement rather than ceremonial acknowledgments. 1 year has transformed theoretical reforms into operational reality. The department culture hasn't reached perfection. Change never follows linear progress, but the trajectory remains clear through measurable outcomes and shifting attitudes. Chief Madison, Mrs. Washington approaches with the confidence of established relationship. The turnout exceeds our expectations. Your organizing committee deserves the credit, Edward responds. This is community-led in substance, not just appearance. Having officers participate as community members rather than authority figures makes a difference, she observes. People are talking with them, not just around them. Across the room, Brennan staffs a bicycle safety booth, helping a father adjust his daughter's helmet. The interaction flows naturally. No performative engagement or defensive posture, just straightforward service. He's visibly aged during the past year, stress etching new lines around his eyes, but his body language communicates something closer to peace than the rigid authority he once projected. "Officer Brennan has surprised many of us," Mrs. Washington acknowledges, following Edward's gaze, "myself included." "People can change when institutions create the right conditions," Edward responds. "Not everyone, not completely, but enough to matter." Throughout the afternoon, residents approach Edward with varied perspectives: appreciation for specific changes, ongoing concerns, suggestions for further improvements. He listens more than speaks, recognizing that sustainable reform requires continuous community input rather than administrative declarations. As the event winds down, Edward finds himself momentarily alone near the refreshment table. Brennan approaches with purpose, but without his former intimidation tactics. "Chief Madison." He nods respectfully. "Good turnout today." "Officer Brennan." Edward returns the acknowledgement. "Your bicycle safety demonstration was well received." The awkward formality between them acknowledges their history without dwelling on it. Neither man is fully comfortable, but professional respect has replaced their previous power dynamic. "I've been meaning to say something," Brennan begins, then pauses to organize his thoughts. "A year ago, I would have considered today's event a waste of resources. Now I see its value for both the community and officers." "What changes would you implement to ensure accountability in your workplace? Share your ideas below." "The badge isn't about power over others," Edward responds. "It's about service to all. When we forget that, we become what we're supposed to protect against." Power dynamics shape every workplace, every community, every interaction between authority and those subject to it. We witness these dynamics play out in headlines and personal experiences, from traffic stops to corporate boardrooms, classroom disciplinary actions to healthcare decisions. The common thread connecting these varied contexts is the potential for authority to serve either as protection or weapon. Edward Madison's journey from humiliated driver to transformative leader demonstrates the rare opportunity to experience both sides of power's equation. Few who suffer from authority's abuse gain the position to reform the systems that enabled it. Fewer still use that opportunity for genuine transformation rather than retribution. Power dynamics shape every workplace, every community, every interaction between authority and those subject to it. We witness these dynamics play out in headlines and personal experiences, from traffic stops to corporate boardrooms, classroom disciplinary actions to healthcare decisions. The common thread connecting these varied contexts is the potential for authority to serve either as protection or weapon. Edward Madison's journey from humiliated driver to transformative leader demonstrates the rare opportunity to experience both sides of power's equation. Few who suffer from authority's abuse gain the position to reform the systems that enabled it. Fewer still use that opportunity for genuine transformation rather than retribution.